Michael Jackson's only daughter, 27-year-old Paris, walking into a Los Angeles court Wednesday morning, seeking transparency and accountability from the executors of her father's estate.
Paris Jackson has blue eyes, pale skin, and blonde hair. Her father was a black man who grew up in Gary, Indiana, rose to become the biggest pop star on earth, and spent the last years of his life with skin so pale the world forgot what he used to look like. For most of Paris's life, that visual contradiction was something she had to carry, publicly, painfully, and alone. But in the years since Michael Jackson's death, something shifted. Piece by piece, the people who were closest to the situation started talking. And what they said didn't just complicate the story. It cracked it wide open. This is everything that actually happened, and why Paris's own response to all of it is the most important part. The marriage that started all the questions. Most people remember Michael Jackson as a solo force, singular, untouchable, almost mythological. But in November 1996, he got married. Quietly, in Sydney, Australia, to a woman named Debbie Rowe. She wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't a musician. She was a dermatology nurse who worked at a clinic in Beverly Hills, and she had known Michael for years through his longtime dermatologist, Dr. Arnold Klein. The nature of that marriage raised eyebrows from the very beginning. The two had never been publicly romantic. There was no courtship narrative, no red carpet appearances as a couple, no real build-up that the press could point to. And then suddenly, a wedding. The explanation that emerged, partly through Debbie herself, was that Michael desperately wanted to be a father. He had spoken about it privately for years. He wanted children of his own, a real family away from the stage lights, something grounded and private. Debbie, who genuinely cared about him as a friend, offered to help make that happen. Their son Prince was born in 1997. Paris followed in 1998, born at a private clinic in Beverly Hills and named, according to family accounts, after the city where she was conceived. Michael was listed as the father on the birth certificate. California law recognized him as the legal parent. By the year 2000, the marriage was over. Debbie signed over full custody to Michael, accepted a financial settlement reported to be in the region of $8 million, and stepped back from public life almost entirely. On the surface, it was an unconventional arrangement, but a closed one. Michael had his children. Debbie had moved on. And the story, as far as the world knew, was settled. What nobody anticipated was that within a decade, almost every person connected to those births would end up saying something that directly contradicted what the others had said. And the domino effect that followed would take nearly 20 years to fully play out. When Debbie Rowe started talking, Michael Jackson died on the 25th of June, 2009. He was 50 years old. Paris was 11. The grief was immediate and global, but in certain corners of the media, something else was also happening. Questions that had simmered quietly for years were suddenly being asked out loud, because the man who had always deflected them was no longer there to deflect. Within weeks of his death, Debbie Rowe gave an interview to a British tabloid. What she said in it was jaw-dropping in its bluntness. She described their marriage as a business arrangement. She said the two of them had never shared a bed. She described herself not as a wife or even a mother in any conventional sense, but as someone who had been paid to carry children through artificial insemination, and who had used an unspecified donor, not necessarily Michael. She said she expected never to see her children again. She said she had been paid for it and moved on. The press ran with it immediately. Here was the birth mother of Michael Jackson's two eldest children, speaking on record, casting serious doubt over whether Michael was their biological father at all. She didn't name a donor. She didn't name a clinic. She offered no documentation. But the implication sat there, heavy and unresolved, right as the world was trying to process his death. What made it more complicated was that Debbie's statements over the years were not consistent. In other interviews and through her legal team, she pushed back against reports that she was not the children's biological mother, confirming that she was. She later rebuilt a relationship with Paris in the years that followed. The two became close again around 2015, a development that added another layer to an already tangled story. Debbie Rowe in 2009 was not saying the same things as Debbie Rowe in 2015, and the media landscape had no interest in reconciling those contradictions. It only wanted to amplify them. The two men who claimed to be the father here is where the story gets genuinely strange, because Michael Jackson's death didn't just prompt statements from Debbie Rowe. It also prompted two other men to step forward and insert themselves into the question of Paris and Prince's paternity in ways that were hard to ignore. The first was Mark Lester. For those who don't know the name, Lester was a British actor famous for playing the lead role in the 1968 film Oliver. He had been a close friend of Michael's for decades, close enough that Michael made him godfather to Paris. In the weeks after Michael's death, Lester went to the press with a claim that stunned people who heard it. He said he had donated sperm to Michael Jackson at a London clinic in the 1990s, before Prince was born. He said he believed there was a real possibility that Paris and Prince were biologically his. He pointed to photographs of Paris alongside photographs of his own daughter Harriet, and said the resemblance was striking. He offered to take a paternity test. His stated reason for coming forward was that he wanted to maintain contact with the children. He was worried about how they were being raised, specifically that Catherine Jackson, a Jehovah's Witness, might raise them in a faith Michael had not wanted for them. But whatever his motivations, the claim was out there, in the press, tied to a real name with a documented friendship with Michael Jackson and a specific account of events. The second name was already hovering over the story before anyone said it out loud. Arnold Klein was Michael Jackson's dermatologist for decades. He was also the man who ran the Beverly Hills clinic where Debbie Rowe worked. The proximity was obvious. When ABC News interviewed Klein in 2009 and asked him directly whether he was the biological father of Paris and Prince, his answer was studied and careful. He said that to the best of his knowledge, he was not the father. He said he didn't want to feed the speculation. He said he had once donated to a sperm bank. He gave no flat denial. The phrasing was so precise that it practically invited the follow-up questions it was supposedly trying to discourage. Then in 2015, Klein posted something on social media that reignited everything. He put up a side-by-side photograph of himself and Prince Jackson with a single caption, just the letter H. The post went viral within hours. Hundreds of articles appeared comparing facial features. Then the post disappeared. But screenshots had already spread everywhere, and the conversation refused to die. Klein passed away later that same year, taking whatever he actually knew with him. Mark Lester, for his part, eventually walked his claims back, not entirely, but enough to muddy the waters further. He told interviewers in later years that it was probably more likely one of Michael's doctors had been the donor rather than him. By that point, the question of who had said what was almost impossible to untangle. All that existed was a fog of competing claims, half-denials, and pointed silences. Paris grows up inside the rumor while all of this was playing out publicly. Paris Jackson was growing up. She was 11 when her father died. She was a teenager when Lester and Klein's names were being circulated alongside hers in tabloids across 3 continents. By the time she was 15, she had already attempted suicide multiple times. She spoke about it later with a frankness that was uncomfortable for people to sit with, about being an intravenous drug addict by that age, about being sexually assaulted, about a therapeutic school in Utah that she was eventually sent to and which she later revealed had subjected students to serious abuse. None of that happened in a vacuum. Paris was living through the aftermath of losing her father while simultaneously being told, by the entire media apparatus of the entertainment world, that she might not even have been his biological daughter. Her appearance, the blue eyes, the pale skin, was treated as evidence, which meant her body itself was being used as an argument. Every public photograph was scrutinized. Every interview she gave was combed for clues. She was a teenager trying to figure out who she was while the world was actively debating whether the most fundamental aspect of her identity was real. What made it worse was the timing of each new wave of speculation. Every time Paris appeared to be moving forward, finishing school, entering the entertainment industry, releasing music, another article would surface, another claim would be recycled, and the conversation would drag her back to the same starting point. It was a cycle that served the media's appetite for the story far more than it served Paris's ability to live her life. And the people generating those headlines were largely not people who knew her, had spoken to her, or had any verified information. They were working from photographs and old quotes, pattern-matching their way toward conclusions that were never theirs to draw. There was also a dimension to this that rarely got discussed directly: what it actually meant for a mixed-race young woman to have her racial identity treated as a debate topic by strangers. Michael Jackson had raised Paris to understand her heritage, to be proud of her roots, to see herself as connected to a lineage and a culture that her appearance didn't visibly broadcast. And then the world kept telling her, through tabloid coverage, through comment sections, through viral posts, that her appearance was the only legitimate data point. That what her father told her didn't count as evidence. That she needed external validation to claim an identity her own parent had given her. In 2017, she sat down with Rolling Stone for what she described as her first and final statement on the subject. She was 18. And what she said was not evasive or diplomatic. She looked directly at the interviewer and said that Michael Jackson was her father. Full stop. She said he always had been and always would be. She said people who knew Michael well told her the resemblance between them was almost frightening. She said she considered herself black, because her father had looked her in the eyes her whole childhood and told her she was black and to be proud of her roots, and she had no reason to doubt him. She pointed out that biracial genetics are not simple, that appearance is not a paternity test, and that Wentworth Miller, a well-known actor with a black father and white mother, looked entirely white to people who didn't know his background. It was a composed, articulate, and quietly devastating response. And for a time, it worked. The conversation cooled. The moment that brought it all back, and what Paris did next, the cooling didn't last. In 2023, Paris Jackson appeared in a supporting role in Amazon's series Swarm. It was a deliberate artistic choice, a dark, provocative show with a lot going on beneath its surface. But one particular line her character delivered sent the internet spiraling back into the paternity debate almost instantly. Her character, in a conversation with the show's lead, mentioned that her father was half black. The reading was immediate and obvious to anyone following Paris's real life. Comment sections lit up. Old articles were reshared. The whole question surfaced again as if the 2017 interview had never happened. This time, Paris did not give a formal sit-down interview in response.